Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Churchill Gun Carrier. So the T150 seemed pretty popular and people seemed quite interested in it, so I thought I'd do a video on the Gun Carrier, which is another interesting 5.5 tank which I feel deserves a video. Speaking of the T150, there is going to be a giveaway of that after the Kenny Otsu giveaway ends, and speaking of the Otsu, there's only 3 winners, so there's going to be a ton of you who don't get the tank, but don't worry. If anything, what the Otsu giveaway shows is that Wargaming's attitude to the tank is changing, and there will be more opportunities to get it down the line. But yeah, back to the video. The Churchill Gun Carrier. This is a really interesting tank. A lot of people will remember it as an infamously terrible, bad tank. However, it's an undeserved reputation. Back then, fair, it's justified. The tank was horribly slow. It had only 88mm of frontal armor, which really all that was good for was resisting HE from most tanks. Not a KV-2, because back then it had more penetration and it could just go right through the front of this tank and one-shot it. But now the tank is great. Back then, it was a 10 out of 10 gun, an amazing gun on a terrible gun platform. And now, it is an amazing gun on an okay to good gun platform. The reason for that is because the Churchill Gun Carrier, since 5.5, has been buffed 4 times, which is a lot of buffs. And they weren't small buffs, they were all big buffs. So, the first buff was taking the frontal armor on the upper superstructure gun cabin from 88mm to 130, and 130 is significant because that is just over the penetration level of low penetration medium tanks such as a Sherman or light tanks. They also buffed the lower plate of the vehicle. The next buff was to the armor again. They buffed it further to 150mm on the frontal cabin, and then also the lower plate as well. Again, a massive significant buff because 150 is the penetration level of higher penetration tanks such as the tier 6 Panthers or Tigers and some other tier 6 heavy tanks. So another buff to the threshold of a penetration level which you face often. Then they buffed the engine power, which was fairly significant considering this tank was fairly slow, and they buffed the top speed from 26 to 30. And then the most recent buff was to the accuracy, which went from, I believe, 0.317 or 0.299 down to 0.290 base, which is, it makes it the most accurate tier 6 tank destroyer, on par with the German tank destroyers. So a ton of massive buffs for this tank, which have now caused it to become a great vehicle. And that's not just because I'm biased towards this tank. It is actually good. It does actually perform. It's what you get when you put decent armor with usable mobility, and arguably the best gun in the game tier for tier, or at least one of the best guns. But yeah, intro to the Gun Carrier, a bit longer than usual, but I feel it deserves it because it has an unjustified reputation, and it's just not fair on the tank. But yeah, let's talk about its stats. So there is a review of this tank on my website under the British Tanks section. And one thing I'd like to ask is, tell me if the balance of audio is okay. If my voice is too loud, if the game audio is too loud, or vice versa. Let me know because I'm not 100% sure myself. But yeah, Churchill Gun Carrier. So you can see its armor here. This is facing the lowest penetration in tier 6, 125 AP. However, I feel it's important to show this because the lowest penetration does also show the premium ammo, and you'll see a stark contrast. So this is a very black and white type of armor tank. You'll know what can and what cannot penetrate you. So 125 AP, you can see upper plate fully impenetrable, well, the superstructure, fully impenetrable, lower plate, fully impenetrable, and then this mid-angled area is actually penetrable. And it looks like the gun mantlet is penetrable as well, but that is 130, so it's not really a reliable place to shoot at. Note, this red sort of highlight will remain like this until roughly the 145mm penetration level. Once you get to 150, then the penetration will be roughly a 50% chance to penetrate, and then some shots will penetrate through and some won't. But then remember, you can actually angle this tank because it has flat angles. You can't side scrape, but you can angle. So that will also help to bounce the 150mm penetration mark. On top of this, use enhanced armor because your armor is just on the threshold of tier 6 penetration levels, and it does really help a lot. But yeah, you can see for 125 up to around 145, the armor is red. There's only one frontal weak point, which is that angled plate. And of course, you can turn the hull. There is this small weak point back here, which is the exhaust, but generally enemies won't know to shoot there, and you will be able to angle the tank. So, switching to premium ammo, you can see the front becomes completely penetrable, and that is because, of course, it's flat armor. It's only 150, which most tanks in tier 6, actually all tanks in tier 6, have more penetration than that, so premium ammo will almost always go through. However, it is worth noting, forcing tanks to use premium ammo is already a win for the Churchill Gun Carrier, which previously could be penetrated by everything with standard ammo. And also for tier 6 tanks in general, having armor on a tank destroyer is quite rare and quite nice. Now, one thing I want to talk about is the armor behind the tracks, which is a known weak point on Churchill tanks. The gun carrier is no different. It is between 110 and 180mm thick, depending on where you shoot. And the reason for that is because they are angled at the top more than they are angled at the bottom, if I can just show here. So you can see 50 angled back, 173 thick, and then at the bottom it's 83. So if you are shooting the Churchill Gun Carrier and you're looking for a weak point because you have low standard penetration, you can go for the tracks. Just try to aim a bit lower. Don't aim up here, aim further down, since the tracks are actually, they do add armor, 20mm, and if you have lower penetration levels, then it won't be going through this upper bit. But yeah, that is the gun carrier's armor. Pretty decent, pretty good for a tier 6 tank destroyer. One thing I do want to point out is, because this is a rare tank, probably a lot of you have looked at it on Blitz kit, the comparison is a bit unfair because the gun carrier has the penetration levels sort of similar to an ISU 152 using premium ammo with calibrated shells. So it's a bit unfair, since that would make the VK168 look like complete and utter paper. So to compare this tank fairly, if you're going to look on Blitzkit, use something with a more normal penetration level. For example, Panzer IV-S would be a good example, since you can see here with that level of penetration, it's a bit more of a realistic view. But yeah, the armor of the Churchill, not bad. When using gun depression, it only increases by 5mm because, of course, it is flat. So not too much to talk about there. It does sort of take you over the level you would need to bounce certain enemies, such as the Panzer IV Schmalturm, which has basically on the level of penetration you'd be looking at for a lot of tier 6 tanks, which is 150. But yeah, moving to the gun, this tank has a 32 pounder, which is a very nice gun caliber, 94mm, since most of the guns at this caliber have a very nice combination, which is good reload, not amazing, but it is good, and good alpha. Again, not amazing, but it is good. It's a sort of combination which gives you very comfortable damage dealing capabilities, because you can both do damage trading and you can do DPM output. But yeah, you'll see on this gun 250 alpha, which is a sort of rare alpha damage, exclusive to 32 pounders previously, 210 on APCR and 330 on HE, all fairly normal damage numbers. 5.9 second reload, which gives it 2527 DPM, one of the highest in tier 6. Penetration 214. This is insanely high penetration. It's hard to compare this level of penetration to other tanks in the game, because the ISU 152, while it has insane penetration, the types of tanks it is facing are a lot more heavily armored. Tier 8 and 9 are balanced more with stronger armor and lower DPM, whereas the tanks that the Churchill Gun Carrier is facing are balanced more around their DPM and their damage output, which is tier 6 to 7 basically. They're less focused around the armor aspect compared to tier 8 and 9, because tier 8 and 9 obviously face higher penetration levels. So it's hard to draw a comparison for this level of penetration. It is extremely high. You can almost auto-aim at everything, almost. So I guess in that sense it's a bit like a Hori. But yeah, APCR 246, among the highest in tier 6 as well. Generally you won't need it. HE 47, perfectly normal penetration. The aim time, very good, 2.7 or 2.9 seconds. That does make it feel like the tank can almost just not aim at all in battles. The base aim time is 1.9, again that is great, though it is not anything completely insane like the Chinese mediums. It is just great, especially when you combine it with good gun handling for a tank destroyer and amazing dispersion of 0.29. On top of this, gun depression is 10 degrees, which I want to point out. This tank has an extremely low mounted gun, so when you use gun depression, it really feels a lot more like 11 or 12 degrees, just because your gun is mounted so low in the hull and you can just use so many positions very easily due to it. So, amazing gun depression, arguably the best in tier 6 for a tank destroyer. Actually, it is the best in tier 6. There's very few others which have a casemate gun with 10 degrees. Now, I want to compare this gun to other tier 6 guns because I call it the best gun in the game for its tier, arguably. And you'll see here why that is. So, DPM, obviously, compared to the crazy DPM of the Kryos and Jagdpanzer IV, it is nothing too amazing. However, those tanks are sort of outliers, so compared to the more normal tier 6 tank destroyers, its DPM is still one of the highest, only 20 or 30 off of the Panlong or Epsilon, which also have very high DPM. Next, reload time, you'll see it is good, especially for having 250 alpha. Again, the Kryos and Jagdpanzer IV sort of outcompete it, but that's because they have outlier type DPM. And here's the really big sort of winner on this tank. Penetration 214. Absolutely decimates everything else. Only the Epsilon and Nashorn can even come close with their 203. 214 is completely insane penetration, and where these other tanks would have to load gold, you don't have to. And look at that, the Jagdpanzer IV and Kryos only have 225mm of gold penetration, and this one is only 11mm off with its standard ammo. Next, alpha damage, you can see it is good. It's lacking behind tanks like the Panlong and the Pirate, because those have just bigger calibers, but it is not bad alpha, especially for its DPM. Shell velocity, you'll see, is pretty average, nothing amazing, and its aim time among the best, except for the Hellcat and the Panlong, but you'll see where it loses out on that aim time, it makes up for with its amazing gun handling, which nothing else other than the Epsilon is able to compare to, and then amazing dispersion as well. So you can see the overall combination of this gun makes it just the best gun, arguably, in tier 6, and tier for tier, one of the best in the whole game. It lacks nothing. Great DPM, fast reload, good alpha damage, amazing penetration, fast aim time, great accuracy, great gun handling, amazing gun depression. so it's just a great overall gun. So, next, the mobility. This is by far the most lacking area of the tank, but compared to what it used to be, and for a Churchill, it is not bad. So speed 30, fairly limited, but it's okay because a lot of the time you won't actually need too much more speed than that. 12 in reverse is poor, it's quite slow. Traverse speed is 44.5 on medium hard terrain and 37 on medium. Both of these are actually very good traverse speeds because this tank has armour, so being able to turn quite quickly is just something very nice to have. Acceleration rate is almost 12. Its engine power is quite weak for being a 41-ton tank. And then its actual acceleration is 11.8 on hard terrain. Again, that's quite slow. 9.8 on medium. It's relatively slow, but it's not terrible for having some armor and good terrain resistances as well. So this mobility is not great, but it's not terrible. It's not unusable, and if you do compare it to, let's get the Dreadnought in here. If you do compare it to the Dreadnought, which is sort of the most comparable tank to the Churchill, you'll see that it's actually got a lot better top speed, which is something very nice to have. And you do feel the difference if you guys have played the Dreadnought before. You'll know it's a very slow tank, despite its good traverse speed. But yeah, mobility overall, it's alright. So, getting into the equipment, definitely use a gun rammer. There is no need for more penetration on this tank. Even if you want to min-max on the penetration, it makes you worse in battle, because a lot of the time you won't need the penetration, and there's nothing you can do to make your reload faster in situations where you need the DPM, other than adrenaline. But if you think about that, with adrenaline and gun rammer, it would have been even quicker. So just use a gun rammer. There's no point to use calibrated shells. Next, camouflage net, because this tank's camouflage is actually very good. Look at the camo on firing is 23. That's very nice on firing camo, and it means that sometimes you can pull off shots without getting spotted. For a tank which is this clunky, it's actually pretty good camo rating. Next, the engine accelerator, of course, because the traverse speed of this tank is already pretty good, and having better acceleration is just helpful for getting up the hills and those situations where you just are going along uneven terrain. Next, enhanced armor, because this tank, despite its low 850 base HP, 34 HP is not worth it. Enhanced armor pushes you over the level of 150mm of penetration, and like I said, there's so many tanks which you will face which have 150mm of penetration or thereabouts, and enhanced armor just makes you a lot more reliable against those tanks. For example, the Britannia Panther, the Kuromori Mine Mini, all the other tier 6 Tigers like the Icebreaker, the Barkan, VK30 6.01H. Then there's tier 7 tanks such as the Type 62, the Sphere, the Leo, those types of tanks which all have roughly the 145 to 155 penetration mark. There's just tons of them, and enhanced armor is so useful for bouncing them. But next, gun lane drive or supercharger. Both can work, because this tank, while it has okay shell velocity, 878 meters per second, it is not anything super impressive. And if you are sniping at long range, you will be able to notice you do still have to give a bit of lead on your shots. However, for me, I like having the gun lane drive, just because in top tier battles I like playing a bit more aggressively, and I don't need the shell velocity. This also makes the gun just very snappy, very quick aiming. Next, vertical stabilizer. This is my personal preference because 0.290 dispersion is already amazing, and I really want to maximize on the aspect of this tank which is allowing it to basically snap shots in very quickly, very easily, with amazing aim time. One other aspect you have to consider is this tank's gun arc is only 5 degrees to each side, which means the tank always has to turn the hull to be able to shoot other enemies, just because your gun basically is fixed in the hull. One other thing to note is because your traverse speed is fast, your gun does actually bloom out quite a bit when you do have to turn the hull, which is very often in this tank. So yeah, vertical stabilizer for me. You can use refined gun. I don't think it is needed though. Provisions, just the normal set, because this is a 5.5 tank. It was removed from the tech tree. It doesn't have anything special added to it. But yes, Churchill Gun Carrier. Let's get into some battles. So the first game I will show is on Yukon. In this battle, it's not so much about the armor use or anything else, it's just sort of showing how the gun can work, which is the main point of this tank. One of the best guns in the game, tier for tier, so that's the main reason you play it. Of course, one obvious comparison is to the Dreadnought, because that was a battle pass tank and it looks almost the same as the gun carrier. However, the Dreadnought is a completely different type of tank. Its gun is much worse. Its mobility, it has worse acceleration significantly and significantly worse top speed, but it does have better traverse. Now that shot, I have no idea what happened. Not a fault of the gun, not really a fault of my aim, I don't think, because it was fully aimed on the chaffee and it somehow hit the ground. But yeah, anyway. The Dreadnought, completely different type of tank. It's more of an assault TD because it has great armor, but a worse gun and worse mobility. This one, you play it for the gun, and on top of that, the other aspects are also pretty good. So here you'll see I'm not pushing out because I don't want to take two shots from two different IS tanks, and with my 150mm of armor and their 175 pen, I know I won't be bouncing. So here I notice the Basotto off to my side, so I decide I'll try get two shots into the IS before I turn, and I know I can do that because my DPM is pretty good. I get a nice ricochet from the Basotto, and here notice he's shot. That guy has 300 alpha with an 8.5 second reload. My reload is 6 seconds with 250 alpha, so I can easily out DPM him. And despite him having a lot more HP, 100 on a tank destroyer is a lot at this tier, I'm still very easily able to kill him before he reloads. But here you'll basically see, despite the battle not being very long, me only shooting a few tanks, I've gotten out the damage pretty quickly. 2,150 already, now we're just hunting down the last VK. With 7 tanks alive, I know that once the VK is found I'm not going to get very much damage, so I just have to try and get what I can. So here, one shot, and I'm about to reload and he goes down. That's what happens with Steamroll 7-0 battles. But that game, you could see, I still bounced a few shots, not many, but mainly it showed the gun working in a more active style of gameplay. Though I wouldn't always recommend playing the tank like that when you are a bottom tier vehicle. And I'll show that in this next battle. So, how I'd recommend playing the gun carrier when it is a bottom tier tank is as a sniper. That is because it has very low hit points of 850, which even for tier 6 is quite low. And it does mean that tanks like the IS in the previous battle can almost two-shot you if they get a bit lucky and high roll slightly. On top of this, your armor just doesn't work as well because a lot of tier 7 tanks just have more penetration. The tier 6 heavies, which might have a 50% chance to bounce you in tier 6, it doesn't happen in tier 7. The mediums might, but not the heavies, and a lot of the time you will find yourself coming up against heavies just because they're quite a common enemy to fight. And even when you do fight mediums, their penetration is also a lot of the time high enough to go through at least 50% of the time. So there you can see a bit of a lazy shot by me, not really aiming too well on the M41. And then again a bit lazy using auto aim, but you can see with no armor on the Bulldog, there's no issue with that. But here you can see I was starting the battle sniping. Seeing there's only 2 tanks over here, I decided to push up and play a bit more actively. But in tier 7 battles, generally, try to snipe, avoid the front lines, avoid taking shots. That Blaze, I get very lucky, he decides not to shoot me, because if he did, half my hit points would be gone. So again, a bit of a lazy shot there. I should have led the shot. I know the velocity isn't anything insane, so that was my bad really. But you can also see a little bit the shell velocity there. But here is the main part of the gameplay I wanted to show. Sniping against the tier 7 heavy tanks, this is what the tank is good at. It's got an amazing gun for sniping. Very high penetration, very good DPM, great accuracy, great aim time, and great gun handling. So it does rack up damage very quickly in these sorts of situations, as long as there are enemies to shoot at. So here you can see sort of the nice thing about such a gun. It's got the alpha to deal with enemies, but also got enough of a reload time to be able to quickly respond to situations, like killing the Tiger P, then switching over and killing the KV-1S before he got into cover. There you can see a bit of a bad shot by me. I turned the hull right before shooting the KV, causing my gun to bloom. So here I'm going to push up. Try and get a bit more damage out because I'm on full hit points and there's only 2 tanks left. Again you can see, even though I was moving, gun aimed in quickly, able to get a shot on the KV. And here you can see sort of the great penetration of the tank. Despite that Caro having their hull sort of angled up, I still sort of had a slight chance of penetration when they were moving, just due to their changing angles. So, kind of a nice, fairly average, nothing too amazing battle in the Churchill Gun Carrier. You'll notice that this tank, once its gun really gets going, it's not too hard to do above 2,000 up to 3,000 damage, as long as you don't have a terrible team or get bum rushed. But yeah, that battle, pretty nice for sniping gameplay. You can also see the credits it's making. It's alright. But again, these tech tree tanks, removed 5.5 tanks, are just regular credit making vehicles. They're not like premiums or anything. Move out. So in this battle, top tier, something I want to point out is the enemy tank lineup. So, out of these tanks, what can penetrate me? The 88 has 171mm of penetration. He can go right through the front of my tank. The M6 has 160, he can go right through the front of my tank. Everything else will bounce off. So, pretty easy matchup to deal with for this tank. And let's say I was on the enemy team, you can look at my team lineup. MX-12T would bounce Stridsvagn, I believe that has pretty okay penetration. I think that has a chance to penetrate. VK, that would go through. AMX would bounce, KV would bounce, and the Semavente would bounce, I believe. Anyway, this tank, you can see in a matchup like this, it's got pretty effective armor. And you'll notice that I do actually get some ricochets in this battle. However, you'll see how I'm playing the tank. A bit of a support vehicle, helping out my allies, who are already pushing the front line. But also, with my pretty good armor, and with only 2 tanks on the enemy team which are able to penetrate me, I am going to play a bit more of an assault role, which is sort of similar to the Dreadnought. But here you can see I'm getting penetrated by the 88. However, easy shot into his front with AP, the amazing penetration that this tank has. and also you could see the gun depression use in that situation there. But here you can see M6, he's just shot, so I'm going to go out and try and put damage into him. He shoots me again, but notice how quickly I'm taking out his hit points. With such good DPM and reload, you can quite easily trade just one shot of damage for 2 or 3 and finish off enemies like that. So here again, notice in this situation, the gun depression of this tank, you can sort of see how it is very nice because the hull is so, well, the gun is so low to the ground, and it allows me to very easily be able to get the gun on target before my whole tank really goes over the ridge. But again, this battle, just sort of methodically killing the enemy team as we go through their tanks one by one. I haven't bounced all that much in this battle, but you can see by the gameplay I'm playing quite aggressively for a tank destroyer, and the reason for that is because I know my armour will work. Otherwise I just wouldn't be playing like this, and I'd be a bit more careful. But yeah, this game basically over now. Unfortunately I don't get any more damage because of the gun elevation here. But a pretty good result, and you can see how the tank plays a bit more of an active role when it is top tier, facing tanks that can't penetrate it. Unfortunately I did get shot by the few tanks which can penetrate me, but oh well. 2,400 damage almost, again making okay credits with a credit booster, but not the best for a tech tree tank obviously. But yeah, the Churchill Gun Carrier. Overall, it's a nice tank. It's actually quite good, and that is just because it has a combination of stats which of course all tanks want, which is armor combined with gun combined with mobility. Notably, the mobility on this tank is lacking. It's definitely its weakest trait. However, it's not like it used to be, which was a very low top speed, terrible acceleration, though it did have good traverse. That's not been buffed yet. But yeah, overall it is now a nice tank. It used to not be, but now it does actually have good traits because Wargaming fixed the biggest issues on the vehicle. Its very weak armor has now been buffed to be actually rather strong, and its very slow acceleration and 26 kilometer top speed have now been buffed to a decent 30 kilometers with an okay acceleration rate. And of course, they've not nerfed the gun, they've even slightly buffed it, which just adds to the fact that its gun is just absolutely amazing. So yeah, out of all tanks in tier 6, I would say this one is definitely not as strong as the Cryos, because that tank is just overpowered. But it is quite a nice tank, quite a unique, interesting vehicle. Unfortunately, this one is quite hard to obtain. It's only been available in luxury lounge containers with a very low drop chance, so it's not actually all that common either, despite having come available. But yeah, Churchill Gun Carrier. I'll say if you do like tanks with great guns, if you like tanks with an okay combination of stats, you might like this one. I really enjoy it. I really like how its gun feels so good, and its sort of unique look and style of gameplay. But yeah, that is the Gun Carrier. Thanks for watching.